On my wedding day, my mother stood up during the vows and laughed bitterly. Funny how you forgot where you came from. My fiancé squeezed my hand. I said, no, I remember. That's why I'm leaving it behind. I, 34 female, got married 4 years ago to the love of my life, Rowan, 36M. During our wedding ceremony, my estranged mother stood up in front of everyone and made a scene, accusing me of forgetting where I came from. I calmly responded that I remembered, and that's exactly why I was choosing to walk away. Since then, we've had no contact. Now, she's resurfaced, trying to re-enter my life after years of silence, bitterness, and emotional neglect. I don't know if reconnecting would be healing or just another way to get hurt. It had been a perfect spring day, the kind where the sky feels like it's been scrubbed clean, a blue so crisp it hurts your eyes to stare at it for too long. The trees in Central Park were just brushing green, and the conservatory garden smelled like fresh lilacs and newly mowed grass. I remember thinking, maybe everything led to this. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I thought I'd be nervous. Not because of Rowan, no, never because of Rowan. But because I'd invited her. Delora. My mother. The idea of sending her an invitation had hung over me like a thundercloud for months. My therapist asked why I was considering it. Closure, I said. Maybe it's my way of closing the book. Closure doesn't require presence, she said gently. Sometimes silence is the only answer you'll get. Still, I sent it. I told myself it was the mature thing to do. That maybe, just maybe, she'd see me standing there in my dress and realize that I had become more than what she used to call that girl with ideas too big for her zip code. She arrived late. Of course she did. She walked down the aisle like it was a courtroom and she was here to deliver the verdict. I watched her settle into the back row. Didn't smile. Didn't nod. Just folded her arms and stared. Rowan noticed. He squeezed my fingers as we stood hand in hand at the altar, like he could feel the tension humming through my bones. Then, the vows began. He went first. His words weren't grand or poetic, they were true. They were about morning coffee routines and loving each other through the boring and the messy. He made people laugh. He made me cry. When it was my turn, I started to speak, but before I could finish the first line, she stood. Funny, Dolores said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Funny how you forgot where you came from. The garden fell dead quiet. I turned toward her slowly. I remember feeling oddly calm. Maybe because I'd played out this exact scene in my mind too many times before. I looked at her and replied, no, I remember. That's why I'm leaving it behind. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't angry. It was just the truth. She turned and walked out before the vows were over. Some guests looked confused. Others looked horrified. My cousin Nia, who I hadn't spoken to in years, buried her face in her hands. Rowan didn't say a word. Just pulled me closer, whispered, I've got you. And we got married. The days that followed were peaceful, almost too peaceful, like the kind of calm you only feel when you've finally shut a door that had been creaking open for years. We left for our honeymoon in France. We drank wine in Marseille, read books on the beach, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. But when we returned, a letter was waiting for me. A single envelope with my name written in slanted block letters. No return address. I opened it and immediately recognized the handwriting. Delora. Inside was one line, you were always too quick to walk away. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because for once in my life, walking away had brought me peace. Over the next year, nothing came. No phone calls. No texts. No more letters. Rowan and I settled into married life, slowly learning what it meant to build a home that was filled with presents, not just people. Then, we had Sabine. She was born in late November, in a hospital in Brooklyn, just as the first snow began to fall. Holding her cracked something open in me that I hadn't realized was still locked up. I cried the first night we brought her home, not because I was overwhelmed or tired, though I was both, but because I realized I had the chance to start over. To parent differently. To love without strings attached or conditional approval. We sent a baby announcement. Not to Delora. Just to the people who had earned their place in our lives. 6 months passed. Then came the knock. Rowan was out grocery shopping. I was alone with Sabine when the doorbell rang. I opened it with my daughter in one arm, and there she was. Delora. Her hair had gone fully gray, and her eyes looked smaller somehow, like they'd pulled back into her skull. Her mouth was tight, a little quiver at the edge. She looked older than I remembered. Not just older and fragile. I heard you had a baby, she said. I didn't move. Sabine stirred in my arms. I didn't come to fight, she added. I just wanted to see her. To see you. Something in me recoiled and softened at the same time. Memories collided, late nights listening to her weep through closed doors, her angry silence when I got my acceptance letter to Rutgers, her refusal to come to my graduation. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes didn't flash. She didn't raise her voice. She just nodded, like she'd expected it. Then she said something I hadn't anticipated. I wasn't a good mother. I know that. I just thought maybe you'd give me a chance to be a decent grandmother. And just like that, the peace I'd fought for started to shake. I didn't say anything. Just stood there, holding Sabine, while the weight of it all pressed down on me. I watched her standing on the steps of our brownstone, a woman I hadn't truly spoken to in nearly a decade, and I felt everything and nothing all at once. Rage. Pity. Exhaustion. A weird, dull ache. It wasn't the kind of pain that burned, it was the kind that throbbed quietly in the background, like something you learn to live with until it reshapes you. Sabine shifted in my arms, her tiny fingers curling against my chest. She had Rowan's eyes wide and steady. Seeing her in that moment grounded me, reminded me that I was no longer the same scared daughter who used to tiptoe around creaking floorboards, terrified to set off an argument with a slammed cabinet or the wrong tone. I don't know what to say, I said finally. You don't have to say anything, Delora replied. I just wanted you to know I'm not dead. The way she said it wasn't dramatic. It was just flat. Matter of fact. I didn't assume you were, I answered, because I hadn't. But I also hadn't cared enough to wonder. She nodded once, glancing briefly at Sabine, then back at me. She looks healthy. She is. A silence bloomed between us, long and uncomfortable. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Then she said, I'm in the city now. Renting a place over in Elmhurst. Nia told me, well, she told me you might not want to see me. But I figured, what's the harm in showing up? The harm? I wanted to laugh. But I didn't. Because what could I say? That her presence brought back a tidal wave of old bruises, that the way she stood there, expectant but empty, made me feel 13 again, aching for something she had never had the capacity to give? I think you should go, I said quietly. Delora blinked a few times and nodded again. No argument. No anger. Not even disappointment. Just a slow, almost too understanding acceptance. Before she turned to leave, she said, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me either. But if you ever want to talk, I'm here. Just once. I'd like to meet her before I'm too old to walk across the street. Then she walked away. I didn't cry. I didn't call Rowan immediately. I just went back inside and held Sabine closer, breathing in her warm baby scent, thinking about how many versions of me had been buried to get to this moment. The girl who used to stay up all night listening to her mother scream in an empty room. The teenager who had to get her own prom dress from a clearance rack at Sears. The college freshman who didn't get a single congratulatory call or text after moving into her dorm. That girl was gone. I wasn't her anymore. I was a mother now, and everything I did had to go through the filter of what my daughter would grow up remembering. I didn't tell Rowan about the visit right away. Not because I was hiding it. I just needed time to process it before I invited someone else into the fog. When I did tell him 2 nights later, after Sabine had gone down and we were curled up on the couch, he didn't interrupt. He didn't offer solutions. He just listened. "Do you want her in your life?" he asked finally. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't even know what that would look like." Rowan nodded. "You don't owe her anything, Marin. But you also don't have to decide today." That was the thing about Rowan. He didn't try to fix things. He made space for them. For me. Over the next few weeks, I caught myself thinking about her more often than I wanted to. I'd be feeding Sabine and wonder what Delora fed me when I was a baby. I'd be folding laundry and remember how she used to forget to wash my gym clothes, sending me to school smelling like mildew. But I also remembered the softness, however rare it had been, the time I had a fever and she stayed up rubbing my back all night, the time I broke my arm and she held my hand the entire ambulance ride. She wasn't a monster. She was just broken. Incomplete. The question was, did I want to let her try again? Or was this a trap I was walking toward, too desperate to believe it might be different this time? 2 months after her visit, I got another letter. No envelope this time. Just a card slipped under the door. A picture of daisies on the front, and inside, her handwriting again slightly more shaky than before. "I've started volunteering at the community center in Elmhurst. Tuesdays and Thursdays. I leave at 3. If you ever want to talk, I'm there. No pressure. No signature. No apology. Just an open door." I held the card for a long time before sliding it into the drawer with Sabine's birth certificate and our marriage license. I didn't go. Not yet. But I didn't throw it away either. I didn't talk to anyone about the card. Not Rowan, not my therapist, not Nia. It stayed in that drawer like an unopened memory, visible only when I needed a reminder of how complicated life could get even when you thought you'd cleaned the house. The truth was, part of me wanted to see her. Not because I missed her, or because I believed she'd changed. But because I needed to know if I'd changed enough to face her and not flinch. I wanted proof that I wasn't still some brittle version of myself, afraid of her moods, her manipulations, her unpredictable warmth that always turned cold too quickly. Sabine was growing fast. She'd started teething, and sleep was a rare gift. One rainy Thursday, I was rocking her in the glider by the window. The city outside was muffled, the way it always is during a steady spring downpour. I thought about the volunteer center. I thought about 3 p.m. By 2:30, I was pacing. By 2:45, I was out the door. I left Sabine with Rowan and took the subway to Elmhurst. I didn't even text Nia. I didn't want any witnesses if it went wrong. The community center was unimpressive beige siding, a flickering neon sign in the window advertising ESL classes and low-cost tax prep. Inside, it smelled faintly of floor cleaner and something fried. There were tables of pamphlets, cork boards with curling flyers for bake sales and donation drives, and a cluster of kids coloring at a back table. I spotted her before she saw me. She was standing behind a folding table, sorting canned goods into cardboard boxes. She wore a windbreaker and a pair of old sneakers I vaguely remembered her having when I was a teenager. Her gray hair was tied back, her face unguarded, calm. Not cheerful, but not stormy either. I almost left. I had turned, one foot already stepping back toward the door, when she looked up and saw me. Our eyes locked. For a second, nothing happened. She didn't gasp. She didn't smile. She didn't call out my name. She just looked at me with something I couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe. Or disbelief. Then she stepped out from behind the table and walked toward me slowly, like I might vanish if she moved too fast. "You came," she said. I did. A beat passed. Then another. "Want to sit?" she asked, nodding toward a pair of folding chairs by the window. I nodded. We sat. It was the kind of silence I remembered from my childhood. But this one didn't carry the same edge. It wasn't loaded with accusation or tension. Just space. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For showing up." "You didn't have to." I didn't respond. I didn't know how. "I'm not here to rewrite history," she added. "I know what I was. What I did. Or didn't." She turned slightly toward the window, watching the drizzle. "I wasn't ready to be a mother. I thought I'd figure it out eventually. But time got away from me, and resentment settled in like mold. I know that doesn't excuse anything." "No," I said softly. "It doesn't. But I thought if I waited until I was better, whatever that meant, you'd be gone." And I was right. Still, her voice didn't waver. She wasn't trying to cry or make a scene. If anything, she sounded resigned. Hollow in a way that had nothing to do with manipulation. "I don't know what you want from me," I said. "I don't know either," she said. "Maybe nothing. Maybe just, not to die with all of it sitting in my chest." I let that settle. Outside, a bus rolled past, splashing a wave of water onto the curb. "I have a daughter now," I said. She nodded. "I don't know what kind of place, if any, you could have in her life." "I understand. But if I let you in, and it hurts her." She turned sharply to look at me. Don't let me near her if that's even a possibility. She didn't do anything wrong. She doesn't deserve to carry any of this." That caught me off guard. The clarity of it. The lack of defensiveness. "I used to tell myself I did my best," she continued. "But the truth is, I didn't. I gave up. I gave up on everything and blamed you for reminding me of it." I looked down at my hands. I hadn't realized I was twisting the hem of my coat. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I wouldn't blame you if you did. I don't. I just stopped needing anything from you a long time ago. And now that I have a family of my own, I see how much I didn't have." She nodded. "I see it too." We sat there for a long time. No grand revelations. No tears. Just two women with a past too sharp to hold, trying not to bleed. Eventually, a young man came by and asked her something about the donation boxes. She stood up, told him she'd be there in a minute. Then she turned to me. "Thank you for giving me this much." I stood, too. "I don't know if I'll come again." "You don't have to." I walked to the door. Hand on the handle, I paused. "Don't expect me to fix this." "I don't." Then I left. That night, I didn't tell Rowan everything. Just that I saw her. That she was volunteering. That she wasn't trying to push her way back in. He didn't press for more. Just wrapped his arm around my shoulders and kissed the side of my head. Later, while feeding Sabine, I caught myself humming something soft and familiar. A lullaby I hadn't thought of in years. It was something Delora used to hum when I was small, during the rare nights she didn't come home angry or dead-eyed from her shift. For a brief second, I saw her again, not the woman on the steps of my wedding, but the one who, just once, stayed up with me through a stomach flu, gently wiping my forehead with a damp cloth. The memories were still jagged, but they weren't all poison. That confused me more than anything. The days that followed felt strange, not turbulent, exactly, but shifted. Like when you move furniture in a room you've lived in for years and then keep bumping into things because your muscle memory hasn't caught up yet. Something in me had shifted just by seeing her again. I hadn't forgiven her. I hadn't even decided if I wanted to. But her presence was now back in my head, taking up space I'd cleared a long time ago. Sabine was teething hard. Rowan and I were both sleep-deprived, stumbling through days on caffeine and instinct. And still, somehow, I found myself thinking about Delora in the quiet moments, like when I was rocking Sabine at 3 a.m., when the world outside was hushed and it was just me and the soft creak of the glider. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't even a curiosity. It was something more complicated, a kind of simmering awareness. A reopening. Nia texted a week after the community center visit. I hadn't told her about it, so when she wrote, Aunt Dee said she saw you. Is that true? I stared at the screen for a while. I replied simply, yeah. Just once. She didn't push. Just heart reacted and left it at that. And I was glad. I didn't want advice. I didn't want mediation. I just needed time. About a month later, a small package arrived at the apartment. No return name, but the address was familiar: Elmhurst. I knew it was from her before I even opened it. Inside was a children's board book. Worn, but clean. It was The Runaway Bunny, one of the few she'd read to me when I was a kid. Tucked inside was a short note in the same wobbly handwriting: I used to read this to you when I wasn't too tired to try. Thought maybe Sabine might like it more than you did. No pressure. D. No pressure. That was a new one. I put the book on the shelf in Sabine's nursery. Not at the front. Not hidden. Just there, among the others. I told myself I wouldn't read it to her. But one night, with Sabine already drowsy in my arms and nothing else within reach, I grabbed it without thinking and began to read. As I turned the pages, I heard my mother's voice echo faintly, not as it had been in the wedding garden, sharp and scornful, but as it once had been, years ago, when I was small and still hopeful. It was strange, the way that sound lodged in my throat. I didn't cry. But something shifted again. Softer this time. Still, I didn't contact her. I didn't send a thank you note. I didn't even acknowledge the package. Part of me still didn't trust it. Another part didn't want to encourage hope, hers or mine. Then one Sunday in early August, I saw her again by accident. Rowan and I were at a small outdoor market with Sabine in the stroller. We were walking through a row of artisan vendors' handmade candles, small batch honey, that kind of thing, when I looked up and saw her across the way. She was browsing a table of crocheted blankets. She didn't see me at first. I could have turned and left. Blended back into the crowd. But I didn't. Sabine let out a soft squeal, reaching toward the breeze like she wanted to catch it in her fingers. Delora looked up at the sound, and our eyes locked again. I waited for her to come over. For a confrontation or a stilted conversation. But she didn't move. She just looked at Sabine, her face unreadable. Then back at me. She nodded once, acknowledgement, not invitation, and turned away, walking slowly toward the next booth. I watched her go. What was that? Rowan asked gently, following my gaze. My mom, I said, voice low. She saw us? Yeah. And she just left? I nodded. She's not pushing, I added. Not trying to force her way in. She's just kind of there. Like a ghost who's started keeping a schedule. He didn't say anything right away. Just slid his hand into mine. We walked on. Bought a candle that smelled like lavender and cedar. Ate soft pretzels. Laughed when Sabine tried to grab a stranger's sunglasses. But even later, after Sabine had gone down for a nap and Rowan was on a work call, I couldn't stop thinking about her face. Not the worn-down version from the community center or the bitter stranger at my wedding, but the one I'd just seen. Quiet. Careful. Like she knew not to press her luck. A few days later, I opened my email to find another message. Not from her. From the community center. A newsletter. She must have added my address to the list. I almost unsubscribed immediately. But instead, I skimmed it. They were organizing a back-to-school supply drive. Volunteers needed to sort donations and assemble backpacks. For whatever reason, I saved the email. The next day, I reread it. That Friday, I deleted it. That Sunday, I dug it out of the trash folder. Something in me kept circling the thought, what if she really was trying? What if this time was different, not because she'd changed, but because I had? Not better. Not more forgiving. just less raw. I didn't know if I wanted her in Sabine's life. I didn't know if I wanted her in mine. But I couldn't deny that I was thinking about it more than I ever expected to. I couldn't deny that part of me still wondered what it would feel like if I could finally say, out loud and with full conviction, I survived you, and I'm okay. About a month after that last accidental sighting at the market, I decided to volunteer. It wasn't about Delora, or at least that's what I told myself. The community center needed help organizing winter clothing donations, and Rowan had taken Sabine to visit his parents for the weekend. I had time. I had energy. And I had curiosity. When I arrived, they handed me a clipboard and pointed me toward a room full of unlabeled bins. The air smelled like old coats and dryer sheets. I rolled up my sleeves and started sorting without asking questions. It felt good to do something simple, something productive, without it being tied to work or motherhood or trauma. Delora didn't show up that day. Or the next week. I found out later she had quietly stepped back from volunteering. Health reasons, the coordinator said vaguely, though she was still around sometimes. I didn't know if I felt disappointed or relieved. But I kept going. Volunteering became something separate. Something of mine. It's strange how life realigns when you stop obsessing over unfinished business. When you stop trying to rewrite the past and start building something present. Over the next 6 months, I built a new rhythm. Sabine grew into a bold toddler with opinions and tantrums. Rowan got promoted. I picked up part-time consulting so I could spend more time at home. We took a trip to Vermont. I made peace with the idea that not every loose end needed to be tied neatly. Then, out of nowhere, Delora emailed me. Subject line, one last thing. Marin, I wanted to let you know I've decided to move. There's nothing for me here anymore. I'm heading down to Asheville, cheaper living, slower pace. I don't expect anything from you. I've said what I can say, and I've respected your silence. But I left something for you. At the community center. You don't have to go. But if you do, it's yours. D. I sat on the email for 3 days. Then I went. At the front desk, the woman handed me a manila envelope with my name on it. Inside was a handwritten letter and a key. The letter was long. Apologetic in some parts, defensive in others. Still Delora. Still not quite capable of full reckoning. But there was an effort. What caught my attention was the key. It came with an address in an apartment in East Rutherford. She'd apparently kept the lease all these years. I hadn't even known she owned property. In the letter, she wrote, I kept the place because I couldn't let go of the idea that one day I'd be different. That one day I'd have something to offer you that wasn't just regret. It's not much. But it's yours now. I've already signed the transfer paperwork. I just wanted you to have something permanent. Something better than what I gave you when you were growing up. I drove out there the next weekend. The apartment was small, but clean. A second-floor walk-up with sunlight pouring through the south-facing windows. Old carpet. Beige walls. But it smelled fresh. Someone had cleaned it before handing it over. On the kitchen counter was a sealed envelope with Sabine's name on it. I didn't open it. It wasn't mine to open. I tucked it into a fireproof box for when she's old enough to decide for herself. I didn't call Delora. I didn't email back. But I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat in a place she'd once made ready for me, and I let myself feel what I felt. Grief. Gratitude. Something like closure. And then I went home. Fast forward 2 years. I've turned the apartment into something beautiful. I never moved into it, but I transformed it into a women's support space. Free therapy sessions. Resource referrals. Resume help. Coffee and community. I named it The Nest. Rowan helped me set up the LLC. Sabine, now nearly 4, likes to sit at the front desk and hand out flyers with glitter stickers on them. Every time I walk through those doors, I think about what Delora said at my wedding. Funny how you forgot where you came from. And every time, I smile. Because I didn't forget. I remembered everything. And I turned it into something better. Not just for me but for women like me who are still clawing their way out of silent homes and long shadows. Delora never met Sabine. And she never will. She made just one grand gesture. And I accepted it. I accepted the key, and I used it to build something she never could. That was her last contribution. And my final reward. That's the revenge. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't return to the fire to prove a point. I walked away, with grace and a hammer in hand, and I built a door that only opens for people who know how to love without conditions. And then I locked it behind me.